Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Payments Leader Show. I'm your host, Adrian Evans, and absolutely delighted. Well, actually, I'm not your host today. That's the whole point today, is the tables are being turned on me, and they're being turned on me by a good partner of mine, Matt Pears. Good morning, Matt. How you doing?
Good morning, Adrian. I'm really well. How yourself?
Very, very well indeed. Thank you, and thanks for hosting today. Just by way of introduction, Matt and I have known each other a number of years now and built a very trusted and mutually respected partnership. And we've decided that actually we've looked at the marketplace, and one of the things we've decided to do is focus on how do people make career decisions, or in many cases, how the career decisions are not made consciously. So we're looking today at the career decision room. So we're going to go in a room today, and we've handpicked, or Matt has handpicked, the five most effective questions or blind spots that people have in their careers. So really looking forward to getting into that, and I'm adding value to people that obviously, because my value where I'm on this room, on this earth, is to positively impact 20,000 careers, and that starts in this room today.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Adrian, and thank you for the privilege of being allowed to put you in the hot seat. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Matt Pears. I'm a communications strategist, and I've been at the intersection of fintech payments and leadership for 15 plus years. And as Adrian said, we've worked together in some of the same conversations, but perhaps in different elements or different sides of the tables, often with some of the same leaders, in fact. And as Adrian says, with the career decision room, what we're looking to do is put advisory thinking in the hot seat, and that's Adrian here today. And the whole purpose is to get you asking better questions and make smarter decisions. So what we plan to do today is I'm going to pose the questions to Adrian. So he's very, very humbly and sort of taking the back seat and said, right, I'm going to be the one to answer some of the questions. But together we're going to unpack the assumptions and perhaps some of the strategic choices that shape careers. And as he mentioned, we're going to go with the five most prevalent themes or blind spots that we've seen that are quietly holding back some of even the most talented or senior people today. So I think without further ado, Adrian, should we dive right in?
Absolutely, can't wait.
So let's start with at the very beginning. It's a very good place to start, as someone was famously said. And let's talk about why relying on your current employer, no matter how long you perhaps have been there, is perhaps not the best way to be thinking about your career in terms of long-term progression and how that catches a number of people out.
Yeah. Well, first of all, to state something here, which is the first career I managed badly was my own. I've been in one organization for 10 years, and despite being a high performer and managing high performance teams within that space, my career was not going in the direction I thought it could. And certainly not the accelerated many other people who I frankly had not as good results as me, but there was something missing. So I've been intrigued by that for about 3 decades now. And if I'm intrigued and curious about something, I'm going to do something about it. And I thought, so I started with my own career because I believe integrity is important to me. And the most important thing to do is actually doing the do and then proving the do rather than just talking about it. But if we look at the current situation, and it has been for many decades now, is lifetime employment just does not exist with one employee. It's extraordinarily rare now when you see somebody with 20 years experience, 30 years experience, or 35 years worth of experience. So this is a pragmatic response to the fact that just relying on long-term employment, it's at some point a shock is going to come. And unfortunately, and it does hurt me when this happens, is too often a shock comes to an individual. They're not ready for it. They're not prepared for it. And unfortunately, not just their career can spiral out of control, but their life can spiral out of control in many ways. The good news is that there is a better response. And I lean on the work here of Reid Hoffman. Reid Hoffman formed LinkedIn. He's written a number of books, one called The Startup of You. So managing your career, I would take very much, I would look at that book, but also a second one, which is how to look at the workplace. He calls it The Alliance. And he said the best thing to do is to have a pragmatic relationship with your employer, which is you are going on, he calls them tours of duty with them. So for short and medium term tours of duty where you are solving a specific set of business problems, and that could be the end of the journey. It could be that you're entering a particular set of region or marketplace, or you're solving a particular set. But that's if you then work together and there's another large sizable problem, you can then move on to it and and then solve another one of those problems together. What this does have is implications, though. Has implications that we need to be thinking ahead. We need to consciously be thinking, where am I heading next? And where am I heading next? Because that allows you to take control of your mindset and also your career. To give you an example, this is something that is absolutely standard with all of my clients. Even when they get a brand new job, the very first thing I said to them is, great, let's plan for your 90 days, because nobody recovers from a poor first 90 days. But you actively keep networking. You actively keep adding value to other individuals. It becomes a default. It becomes like breathing. Yeah. And when you do that, good things are far, far more likely to come your way. And when you have an infinite mindset of being able to add value to others and not keep score and not have a scarcity mindset, good things happen. Example for me, I take one of my clients came to me 2 years ago and said, Adrian, I can feel my companies. This is somebody at absolute peak, by the way. Yeah. I can feel I'm hitting my earnings potential here. But the company isn't investing in the technology the way it had been. There's a lot of new marketplaces that are now covered that we can't go again. Now's the time to move or start moving, because in 6 months' time, somebody could make the decision about me and I want to own that decision. The great thing about this individual, he's been doing this for the last 20 years. He's been investing in significant relationships. So we put the plan in place of getting absolute clarity as to where he was heading next and next. And then just initiated the network plan. But the difference was this wasn't a friction one where you're ringing people you used to work for and you haven't spoken to them for 14 years and they're suddenly now really senior in the business and now you're looking for a job. That's icky. That's like, no wonder that feels sticky, because like you haven't got a relationship. Genuinely, this person made 10 calls, got meetings out of every single one of those, and realized, but we were hunting business problems. We weren't hunting a job. We were hunting, right, what are the key business problems you are looking to solve or markets you're looking to enter? Ended up with 4 offers. Yep. Look who's in control here with 4 offers. Yep. Yeah. But we had the criteria. Which offer were we going to make? And it wasn't just about salary at all. It was about growth in the marketplace, investor caliber of the C-suite that he was looking at, caliber of technology, how much investment they could. So, and we made the right decision. That person has now gone on and yet again gone to President's Club on both years, overachieved again with it. But he's in control of his career, and no doubt when we reach another plateau, or before we reach another plateau, we will do this again.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing there is, it's not that the real danger is change or even the shock that might be coming. It's the passivity that you might have in not networking as you keep going, not engaging, not investing in those relationships. Because when you get to that point where you are facing that shock, whether you've seen it or not, it can land you in that, to your point, an icky situation, talking to people that you've not spoken to for a while.
Absolutely. And just to give you another example, one of my clients recently, I love the advisory work we do, but I love the anticipatory advisory work we do. Yep. Yes. And what I'm seeing, we've seen these patterns over the last 30 years or so. So one of my clients, I said to him, I think you're going to be, I was telling him for 3 to 4 months, I think you're going to be made redundant soon. Yeah, there wasn't a scare tactic, etc. It was let's put plans in place, and it was as good as this could be. His CEO 3 months later called him into a meeting, and we prepared for the meeting. We said, well, we know what's going to happen, and we even know what possible responses we could do. Yeah. So during the meeting, he was calm, he was effective, he wasn't shocked. We negotiated a really good, excellent exit package for him, and then a number of months later, he moved on to the next space, calm, in control, able to communicate with his partner and wife afterwards. And who's in control of that career and who's not?
Yeah. And I guess what I'm thinking here, and I know that we're going to come on to this, but you think in cycles in terms of yes. career and how we move into that. But it's not just your cycle or your career cycles, it's recognizing the business cycles that you are currently working within, so that you can get those two things work in tandem together, and as you say, put you in the driver's seat. But let's dive a little bit more into that and think about career cycles and why. I know you think about it in 4-year cycles typically, don't you? And
Yeah.
you want to explain a little bit more about that and how that works?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and again, I was guilty of this myself, first of all, which was my career every 2 years. It was almost like a bell used to happen. There'd be a reorganization, and I get this nice new, better job. There'd be a business that needed sorting out and changing and turnaround, and I became that sort of turnaround sort of specialist. And then 2 years later, the bell didn't ring, and I was like, "Oh, when's it coming? When's it coming?" And I realized eventually that I'm waiting. I'm just reacting to it, what's happening in the business. But I think, again, I learned this. We're very fortunate to be able to, and I think a lot of people put, unfortunately, more planning into their holidays or vacations than they do into their careers
Yeah.
because they're so sucked into doing the job rather than planning about where the career is actually going. And so I was fortunate enough to live next door to two Olympic gold medalists. Yeah. And what really struck me about them was they plan their whole career around 4-year cycles. They literally live for the next Olympics. But what they can do, and it's planned for them as well, is they know, okay, for me to be in contention for the next Olympics, I need to be in the squad for the World Championships here. Okay, well, that's 2 years away. What's 1 year away? Well, there's European Championships every single year. I need to be in the squad for here. Okay, so what do I need to be doing in September this year to enable myself to be in that place? And if you think even strategically like that, you say, okay, so where am I heading next? And where am I heading next? Where you're heading next is always challenging. But if you've got an idea, at least about where you're heading next, you can ask yourself, does next take me towards it? Or does today take me towards? And that was the critical one for me when I first started using this. I didn't call it that at the time, but it was like, hey, I want to head over here. And where I currently am, I'm either going laterally or I'm going downwards. I'm definitely not going up here. I was 18 months ago with a different board executive, but I'm definitely going down here. Okay, I need to do something about this. I'll give you a good example is you can strategically do this where, one of my clients, he was very strong commercially, built an extraordinary career as being a catalyzer for accelerated hockey sticks level of growth. But his brand was being a very strong commercial operator. His brand wasn't general management, but he wanted to be a CEO. And so we systematically worked on and saying, well, okay, if we know where next is you becoming a CEO. There are various parts of your skill set. You need to actively seek assignments. You need to understand the language of business more. You need to understand finance more effectively. You need to understand funding. You need to understand how to speak to investors. You need to learn how to effectively communicate with them. And you need bigger people responsibility, etc. So his next step was a move towards general management, which was a smaller version of the CEO job that he eventually would do. But what happened over a period of time is that by deliberately taking those steps, he is now a CEO.
Yeah.
But it was interesting. It's like, the first suggestion of being CEO was like, oh, could I do that? Would I do that? Yes, I think I could. And when you deliberately commit to that, you've got far more chance of actually becoming that. I remember myself many years ago having a conversation with somebody, and I said, why do you believe you can become an MD, okay, a managing director? Because the truth was, he was, as an operator, he wasn't brilliant. He was pretty good, but there were a lot of people far more talented, in my view. And he said to me, "Oh yeah, that's the difference." He said, "Where did you think you could get to?" And I said, "Oh, operations director." He said, "Yeah, exactly." He said, "You never thought you could be an MD. Whatever talent you did have or didn't have, you never thought you could get there. So you were never my competition." I was like, wow. Wow. Now that's a pretty harsh way of looking at it. I'd love it to be far more deliberate, far more humane about the way we go about building those goals.
That's really interesting. I mean, to use your Olympic analogy, I guess it's like a heptathlete taking each of the individual disciplines
Yes.
and
Brilliant.
focusing on
Yeah.
those and mastering those as they want to
Yes.
get to that point. And it's the same in every facet of life, because I'm fully aware that as fintech professionals, we don't necessarily get to go to the Olympics, but it's important to break down and say, all right, where would I like to get to?
Yeah.
That's an important part to understand, isn't it?
Absolutely, and we're not going after Olympic gold medals as such, but I would say to everybody, what's your Olympic gold medal? Yeah, and I really like that heptathlon analogy because that's over 2 days. It's grueling, and if you're thinking about the 800 meters on the second day, well, at least you know that's coming, but you can't focus on that today. You've got, I believe, it's the hurdles. The hurdles is the very first thing you're going to do at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock on the very first day, etc. You've got to completely absorb yourself in that. Then you move to the next one. But this is deliberate. So yeah, what are your 7 steps to you actively managing your career rather than being in this vacuum and saying, where are you heading next and next?
Because I guess the problem is that if you don't, then other people start defining that for you, be that the market or the employer that you've had to get the job with, or things of that nature.
200%. And the truth is, it's a bit like your narrative and your story. If you don't own your narrative and you don't own your career plan, by definition, somebody else does. And in a rapidly changing world and a rapidly changing environment where reorganizations happen, it's almost like a national sport, isn't it? And you can be susceptible to do that. But if you know where you're going, and that's always the thing that pains me, is when somebody either gets made redundant or there's a reorganization, it's the shock factor. They haven't suddenly lost their talents. They haven't suddenly lost their abilities. What they have in many cases is suddenly their confidence is shot to pieces.
Yeah.
Yep. I love the example I go back to again, where a client of mine walked into a meeting knowing he was going to be made redundant, knowing what his response was going to be. I think the whole thing was over in 8 minutes, and he walked out, yeah, not with a smile on his face, but like, okay, well, I've certainly got a plan, and I know it's all very calm.
I think the difference there is if you're intentional and if you're in control of the situation, or at least your own situation, you're not losing that level of power or autonomy or peerness with whoever you're speaking with. You are speaking as a peer at all times, even to the person that might be saying, all right, it's time for you to move on, or but if you're ready for it, then you're ready to go forward with it. And I guess if you are ready to go forward, and you spoke of the 10 phone calls and the four offers that came in sort of rapid succession, and I think we both know who that person is without diving into names, but those 4 or those 10 conversations, I guess, in the old school world would be akin to the interviews. But I guess in this scenario, we're reforming or changing the rules of what those interviews might look like or might be. And I guess perhaps you can dive into a bit more of the tips of doing that for someone that isn't perhaps as prepared as that person was, and the importance of it.
Yeah, so it's a term that we hear a lot these days about, is accessing the hidden job market. Just to confirm, that's nothing new. Accessing the hidden job market has been around probably 4 centuries, is the truth. Yeah. And I think what it means, though, is like, I think we have to take a fundamental flow back here. Is like, why do jobs exist? I'm a bit of a career geek, and so I've sort of explored this quite a bit, which is there's 3 fundamental reasons why a job exists, or a combination of each one of these, to either enhance, protect, upsell, cross-sell revenue. Number 2 is to drive up efficiency and drive down the cost of transacting in various forms, the cost of doing business. And number 3, then, to mitigate the risk of doing business. Because ultimately, if we look at venture capital organizations or investors, etc., people want defensible revenue. Now, we've had people on the podcast channel talking from private equity, but any stakeholders, they want defensible revenue, whatever marketplace you're in. So if you can take that approach and think, I'm not actively looking, I am looking for a job, but the first thing I need to do is get out of my own way. If you see people saying, have you got a job? Have you got a job, etc. You need to move from being a job seeker, because you lose all of your power or any of your agency or autonomy if you are just actively looking for a job. You need to flip that, yes, with an infinite mindset, and saying, okay, who do I know who has a significant business problem that I could help solve? It changes it completely. And frankly, the bigger the biggest problem, the better, because the more you can solve that problem, we'll come on and talk about it later, the higher you can ask to be rewarded or to request to be rewarded. So that takes some work though. Yeah. But the good news is there's no business out there, even the best businesses on the planet, that is fully optimized. There's no business that doesn't have significant competition that could do various things and shift its business. We work in payments and fintech, and that's changing at an extraordinary rate, and particularly in the last 5 years. So what's it about? It's about actively doing the research of understanding where you want to go, who are the players within that space, what are the business problems, and then who are the economic buyers, who are the people who make the decisions on hiring. And I'm really talking about the business pain here. I'm not talking about the process of recruiting and hiring. We can come to that later. But who is feeling the pain of that particular region not being optimized? Is it the chief revenue officer? Okay. Who's over here where governance isn't strong, etc.? Is that the chief risk officer of the CEO? But this involves some work. But then what you do is the first business case you put in place is your job request, which is, I'm going to solve this business problem. This is what it's worth to the organization in terms of revenue, reduction of cost, and risk mitigation. And to do that, I will require the following to happen. And ultimately, what it means is you can shape the job that you want. You can't do this all the time, but most of my clients do this. If you don't know the job you want, you just end up with a job like this against everybody else and an algorithm, wondering whether you can do the job or not.
That's so many things to unpick there, but I guess you've spoken there about algorithms, about what you might call standard jobs.
Yeah.
But if you want to tailor it to yourself, what do you need to know about yourself to achieve that? And how do you present those, I guess, skills or wants in that environment?
Well, absolutely. The first thing to do is raise your own self-awareness. You need to understand your strengths. I would go beyond that. It's like, what makes you distinctively you? Very few people take the time out to positively sit down, reflect, and truly understand themselves. What makes them distinctively them? Also, then, what are your weaknesses or areas that aren't your strengths? But understand your values. Understand your value is the most important thing, and understand where you are headed. When you have those things, you're ready now to take that to the marketplace. Then you have to turn that around. You have to then do as much research on those individuals, because the truth is, even in enterprise sales or large organizations, people buy from people, and behind every single resource, including a job, is a person or a series of people who will make that decision. If you can understand them, what their key business problems are, what their fears are, what their risk appetite is, what their ambitions is, if you can get that person and get them to the next level of their career where they want to go, they're probably going to buy into what you've got. Yep. So this is a different mindset to I'm applying for a job to I'm hunting business opportunities and solving latent business problems. So the first thing this starts with actually is reframing this in your mindset, but definitely a significant level of self-reflection to raise your level of self-awareness.
Absolutely. So this all becomes about peer-to-peer conversation. You're placing yourself as a problem solver for someone that has a problem that requires solving that you can solve.
Absolutely.
So this comes down to you found the problem, you found all of the answers to the solution, hopefully within your current gift, and you've had the conversation, you've networked appropriately, and then all of a sudden the age-old question of brass tacks comes down to it, and you start talking about value and what that value is worth to the organization. And it comes down to, I want to be paid the most I can for the value that I'm bringing to the organization, and the organization wants to pay the least it can for that value. And how do you navigate that, and what's your advice to your clients on that?
Sure. I'm very keen to answer that question. And I know most people listening to this are dying to have the answer to that. But I think there's a step just before, which is the peer-to-peer interview. Yep. And I think the most important thing is many people go into the very cases that I'm an interviewee, you're an interviewer, and there's that dynamic, and it's meant from where employers held all of the power, and they've got the resources, etc. The truth is, when you have rare and valuable talents which you need to display, then you want to always be in demand. It changes dynamics completely. And when I talk about meeting your future employer as peers, you need to be interviewing them for their suitability as much as they're interviewing you. Yep. Because where does this come from? This comes from, I know one of the single biggest reasons why, and it's a cliche, and it's a cliche for a reason, one of the single biggest reasons people move on from organizations is because of the relationship with their line manager. Okay. They either don't rate them as a leader, or they micromanage them, or various other things. Well, if that's the case, well, surely you should be interviewing your line manager to understand, are you going to enhance my career and take me to where I want to go next and next, next? Because that's exactly what they're doing to you. They're saying, are you going to be able to enhance my career with my business problems and take me to where I want to go next, next? Yeah. So you need to meet them as peers. So I'll give you a great example of how to do that. And also, the important thing to do is so I remember once recruiting, and there was somebody who was a candidate of mine, and we got to third stage, and there was a job they wanted. The line manager they sort of briefly had brief conversations with, but we were at third stage. They were going to get the job. This was what they call a rubber stamp. Rubber stamps do not exist either side of the fence. She did an extraordinary amount of hard work. And the line manager went, and she interviewed the line manager. And as she realized, hey, you haven't read my CV. You're not prepared for me for this. I've done like 5-6 hours worth of prep on your company, on where it's heading, what it's doing, what its funding looks like, etc. I'd never forget it. She walked out of that interview and I said, how did it go, etc. So I'd already got a text from the line manager saying to me, okay, what do we need to offer this candidate to come on board, etc. What would motivate her? And she said, I won't work for that line manager. I said, why not? She said, he wasn't prepared for my interview. That's basic respect. I don't believe they will go ahead and do well in their business because he couldn't articulate his business plan to me. In fact, I'm absolutely gutted. I don't want to speak to him again.
Wow.
Okay. Now that is somebody who knew their worth. They knew where they were going. They knew what their value were. They had 3 or 4 other positions. What a wonderful position to be in. Yeah. And she was really disappointed because she wanted that job. Okay. Another example for me is, many people say sector experience is the be all and end all. You must have sector experience, and you must have every single component that's on a job description. Okay. Now, for me, if you can do every single component that's on a job description, my question to you is, where is the growth in that job for you? But I remember there was a client of mine, a CEO who in the technology space, travel space, and it was airlines was the largest marketplace they had. And he said to me, we must get somebody from the airline industry. It's must happen. And I said to him, okay, well, I was a different type of headhunter. I said, okay, so can I just understand where your business is heading over the next 6 to 12 months? And he was like, well, this is the job description. I said, I know that's the job description, but where's your business heading? And he said, well, we're lacking growth in this market, this one. And also we need transformation here. It's like, yeah, you do need transformational change. They were way behind their competitors. Anyway, so there was one candidate who I knew who had 0 experience of the airline industry, but had been stellar within the SaaS and technology space. And I'd seen him transform a number of other businesses by taking a systematic and different approach. And this is an extreme case, but I just wanted to show this was a VP of product. This wasn't a small job at the time. This was a bordering on SVP job, and I put my neck on the line, and I said to the CEO, I really recommend you meet this candidate. And I remember the time he said to me, but your reputation on the line here. I will shoot you. if this is not very good. So with the candidates, we both work very, very hard to present a really strong business case at first stage. And just to say, so we did a full-blown SWOT analysis, pest analysis, etc., and presented this to the company. It was really interesting. Feedback after first stage was we wanted to ask the candidate how they demonstrated proactivity. We couldn't ask it because it would have been embarrassing because the guy was so proactive. Yeah. He then exemplified this at second stage and third stage. Yeah. And he went from fifth or sixth on the short list to first. And I think that just demonstrates that's somebody who clearly knew how to be business led rather than job led. So to come to your answer, therefore, how do you, I think the question was, how do you navigate the delicate situation of salary negotiation?
Salary, yeah, money and the brass tacks.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think this does start with a number of things, and we have significant frameworks for doing this, and they've been developed over the last 30 years. And that's one thing about being a headhunter. You are possibly negotiating at least 4 or 5 times a day. Okay. So it's a skill that's almost like breathing that you're doing all the time. So you pick this up and you learn how employers that actually works. The first thing I'd say, though, is you need 2 things. You need 3 things. You need self-awareness, you need the right belief system, and you need the right framework. So let's start with number 1. You do need the self-awareness to know what you are worth. And these days, the data sets that are out there on on AI, etc., it's not difficult getting hold of that data. Many years ago, it's difficult to understand what the data set looks like. You also need the self-awareness of what makes you different. And are you in a position where your brand is rare and valuable? Now, just like any product, whether it's like one of our favorite things that we love talking about, which is wine, what makes wine rare and valuable? There are different components to it, but it's not all about product. Some of it can be about the story that's being sold and also the narrative that's being absorbed as a result, but also beliefs. If you believe that you are at a certain level, and I was guilty of this. Yeah, I was guilty of this. If you believe you're at a certain level and only other people are worth more than that, then by definition, that's how you're going to portray and that's how you're going to negotiate. And guilty as charged. I was really good at negotiating excellently for all my candidates all the time. But when it comes to negotiating for myself, I wasn't very good at it. Okay, which is crazy.
So let's dive a little bit into. Viewers will be jumping at the bit here because we've dangled the carrot of money, and I'm going to slow it down even further here. But I want to dive a bit more into your experience of that self-awareness, because I think that's quite an important part to all of this, because you're saying there in terms of being able to negotiate for yourself, understanding your own values, where you want to get to.
Yep.
What's been your experience? How do you get that self-awareness before you can then use that as a leverage?
Well, for me, first of all, pain. Yep. I remember getting we magnificently, like myself and the team had dramatically increased profit, dramatically driven revenue forward. And I got me lovely 3% increase in annual salary that year. And I remember just sitting down with the person, and he had this huge spreadsheet, and he said, "Oh, I thought you'd be really pleased because you've got a bit more than everybody else." And I started starting to get some self-awareness. I said to him, that might be the case. I said, but my results, or the results I've been able to lead, are dramatically, quantum leap different from everybody else's. Why would I be slightly rewarded by this? And I remember just going home on the train that night. By the way, that's when I used to do the best. The best place to self-reflect is commuting, because when I was commuting in and out of London, that bought me over 10 hours a week to stop and self-reflect. And the first discipline I had, I took that pain and I thought, I'm going to buy a notebook. I've always got a notebook on me. Yep. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm not going to get on my phone until I get in the office. What I'm going to do on my journey is I'm going to focus on Adrian Evans' career, and I'm going to try and understand this problem. Why is it that I can negotiate effectively for all these other people, but not myself? Well, what do we do then? So I just turned that around and said, so I imagined myself being my most important client. So what advice would I give to my most important clients? And the advice would be, okay, have you broken down the impact you're going to have in this role in terms of revenue, in terms of risk mitigation, and in terms of driving down cost? What is that number? Let's put a very large number on that. Yeah. And then say, okay, well, what would be appropriate reward for the value I add? Appropriate reward for the value I add. This needs to be win-win. We're not trying about being greedy or anything here. We're talking about appropriate reward for the value you add. I then realized I was in the wrong company. I was in the wrong company. Yeah. It was never going to happen for me because of hierarchy and various other things. So absolutely, just like an economic agent, you're allowed to pick this up, take it somewhere else where you can actually ensure your appropriate reward. Now, in my case, that was extreme because I then formed my own company. And I formed my own company and I looked at that and go, okay, so now let's look at the revenue, let's look at the risk. And I was like, yep, I'm taking all of those risks. And by the way, I'm going to be rewarded appropriately for the value I add to my clients. But for other employees,
knowing you, I would imagine that negotiation with yourself would have been one of the hardest.
Definitely. And that's the value. That's the value of mentors, coaches, and advisors. To this day, I have a negotiation advisor. 2 weeks ago, there was a substantial engagement opportunity, and I was in a situation where I thought, I think this is going well, but I think I don't know. I feel like I'm missing something. So I called my advisor. We went through that, and he challenged me significantly. I was missing a huge piece out when it comes to who the economic buying unit was, and the language I was using was too focused on the end user and not enough focused on the person who's the economic buyer. We shifted that substantially. He said, this is the business case. This is the language you need to use. What happened? I then went into that negotiation in a really strong position, be able to change language depending on who the different economic buyers were. I was ready, I was confident, and I was able to request appropriate reward for the value we were adding.
So that's really interesting because you're diving into my world there, where the narrative is actually becoming so important. Not just the narrative, but the audience of that narrative. And it may be the same story, but it requires different ways, different triggers, different pulls and pushes to get them to react in the way that you want them to. And I guess that's why people negotiate, right? You need to know who you are negotiating with. You need to know their pain, understand what you can do for them, and take that pain away. It's very little value. It's about an exchange of pain versus solution.
And everything is, I suppose I was very lucky. I was taught about how to negotiate from a very young age by my dad. Probably from the age of 10 or 12. He taught me how to negotiate. And so I've sort of had that for a long period of time. Yet it was only in the professional world where I seen that actually playing out. But the truth is, it's a harsh truth, which is that we don't get paid what we're worth. We get paid what we negotiate.
Yeah.
There's some extraordinary situations in the world where I've seen leaders take over organizations, and again, this is across. This even includes public sector, tech businesses, and they've got people reporting to them who are earning more than them.
Yeah.
And I remember
it's quite galling when it happens as well.
It is absolutely as galling, but the truth is that, and again, I learned this harsh. I remember when the first times I got together when I was very young, and in my professional career, my first job, and I realized I was chatting to somebody from London. I was working in Birmingham at the time, and he was earning 25% more than me for doing the same job. And I said to him, how do you do that? And again, he'd come from a media sales background, a professional selling background. He knew how to do this and position himself. Yeah. So this happens. And again, people will say, okay, but what about constraints within an organization? But if you go into any situation thinking, these are the constraints, let me move around them. Now, let's as we always say on this podcast, let's seek the opportunity first, then let's embrace the risks and the constraints afterwards. And we're not just talking about money. There are many other things like access to resources, early opportunities for reviews, long-term stock options. There's many other things you can negotiate over and above investment in your own education, access to interesting assignments, things that are going to accelerate your career, all when you know where you want to head and what are going to be the accelerators. Just to say as well, many people will say, look, Adrian, there's some phenomenal, my book, even many years ago now, there's some phenomenal rates you've got 48% increases for everybody, but look, we're in a tough marketplace right here, right now. Well, this is a live example from Q1 2026, okay, where worked with a client of mine who has secured a senior level executive position and has got in excess of a 50% increase in salary. Why were they able to do that? Because they knew their value. They knew the sheer size of the problems and the challenges, and this organization has many challenges that they're walking into, but was able to demonstrate all three across there. Very strong, clear understanding on how to solve and drive down transactional value, clear understanding how to mitigate risk, and a clear understanding of how to drive revenue forward, whilst being effectively driving the culture of the organization as well. So it's about impact, and too many people especially see themselves as this is the role, but what impact are you having on your team? What do you have an impact on the organization? What do you have an impact on the industry? And it comes back to my overall philosophy, which is whenever I'm trying to do anything in this world, and that's why one of the reasons I'm in the payments industry, is you can't do much on your own. No. So I always actively seek 4 wins. And I don't mind winning last as long as I win at some point. But whenever I'm working, trying to do anything with anybody in the payments industry, I think, can the industry benefit from this? Can this organization and company benefit from this? Can the executive of that company benefit from this? Can the leader I'm engaged with benefit from this? Can their team benefit from this? If I've got 4 or 5 wins there already, what I think is fair and also appropriate for me to be appropriately rewarded for the impact I'm having across that.
Yeah, and one of my favorite Adrianisms, as I'll call them, is I don't mind winning last as long as I win. But I think actually that humility and putting the problems ahead of that or ahead of yourself is what opens a lot of the doors, because you've already put yourself in that mindset of I'm solving these problems for the industry, the business, the execs, the leaders, the team. So therefore I need to be here and winning because they aren't without me. And because you've thought of them first, it puts them in that mindset as well as you.
Yeah, and I have to acknowledge there are people in the payments industry, they know who they are, who have taken me into the payments industry, who walk around every single day with an infinite mindset. And it looks like good things happen to them all the time. The truth is, that's because they're decent human beings, number one. Secondly, is they are looking to try and help people as much as they possibly can, with boundaries. They need to look after themselves and their self-care as well. So I would like to acknowledge those people. I'll do so privately rather than sort of saying it out here, but I have before as well. They showed me the way about how this industry operates, motivate. But what a great way and what a privilege to live your life like that.
Yes.
Because the truth is, when you actually give back as well, you actually get energy. And many people talk about time and effort, etc. But energy is the thing that is the resource that we really have every day. And we've only got 4 types of it: physical, purposeful, mental, or emotional. And it flows. Yep. And I see many, many people, again, with a very scarcity mindset. There's nothing worse than having a scarcity mindset when you've just been made redundant, because you see people can get bitter quite quickly. Yeah. Whereas it's fascinating for me when I see people who were made redundant but have helped loads of people along the way. Not everybody does it, but many people say, I want to help you. I want to help you. Let me help you in some way. What can I do? Can I make an introduction? Can I invite you to a conference? Can I give you a platform in some way to do something? And it's a nicer way to live life, frankly.
I mean, that's as you say, it's a life skill. That's not necessarily just a career thing. That's a way to live. It also links to, because what we're really talking about there is that perhaps the smartest, the most energetic, the most networked people, the most helping people are the ones that are going to do well in this life. Whereas there is also this other part of the workforce, I guess, that says, well, but I'm more qualified than them. I've done such and such a certificate or degree or diploma or master's. And where does that sit alongside the person that might not be as qualified, or not, in your eyes, not as good, and how they've got ahead? And what's your opinion on that?
Well, let's sort of break this down together. So what I am talking about is the professional job market here. So everybody is educated. Okay.
Yes.
Everybody's well educated, number one. Number two, competence matters, as does a continued investment in education. Yeah. I'm a sort of learn it all sort of guy. I'm always learning, every single week, every single day. So big investment in yourself to continue to learn, to evolve, and to be super curious and learn from people. So building on top of that, though, is that the best jobs, though, do not go to the most qualified candidates. They typically go to the most connected. Yep. The reason for that is because a very basic human one, which is, and again, I first learned this when I was actually recruiting. By the time we got a brief, the company had already been through a process. And the very first process every single company asks themselves is, who do we know? Who do we know who could do this job? Internally, externally, from my network. Why? Because there's a very, very basic human need, which is built on trust. Yeah. And you ask any leader, and they will surround themselves with people they trust. And they would do this. They would have people they trust more than somebody who's actually even more competent. Okay. So therefore, what it means is that if you are not visible to those people, if you are not visible to what's possible, as you don't have a relationship with them, then those people who do have a long-standing relationship with them, they're far more likely to do it. It's an old adage as well in business, which is when people say to you, and it happens all the time, when you say, where do you get your business from? And they say, most of our business is referral.
Yeah.
And even with online these days, etc., even when you're online, everything is, and that's why you've got independent things like Trustpilot, everything is trying to shape trust, social proof, etc. Yeah. But I think the real change for me, and I've just seen this actively as well, is you do need people in the rooms, and we call this the career decision room today, but you need people in those career decision rooms when you're not. You need those people advocating for you. Okay. And again, I'll go back to myself as the very first example here. I knew when I had the results to get promoted. Every KPI had been hit, but I didn't get promoted. And then, almost like magic, when I had a new person I reported to, when my career accelerated, he was in the room advocating for me. My career did this, where previously it flatlined. I'd not suddenly overnight become phenomenally good at what I'd done. My competency was my competency. Yeah. But what I had done was built a very strong relationship and delivered trusted results to that individual over a period of time, understood where they were going, what they wanted to do. And this happened. Sponsorship matters deeply. It matters because if decisions are being made, and these are, again, in our industry, these are made at the absolute margin. You are up against talented people all the time, whether it's for an internal promotion or for a particularly headlining job or whatever. Those decisions are going to be made at the margin. So you need people, or usually they're made by a number of people. So you need to have advocates and plural, in the room who are advocating for you. I'll give you a prime example. There was a client of mine who was an SVP, senior vice president, who was doing phenomenal work. was flying through the organization, but then hits a ceiling like many people do in their careers. And we started working together. We had an engagement, and they said to me, "Well, look, I can't seem to get to the next level. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to get more qualifications. Yep. And I'm going to get better at doing this technology and that technology and the other technology, etc., etc." And I, whilst that was sort of useful, I asked the question: is that going to be the game-changing thing that gets you to the next level?
Yeah.
And the answer was there are other things we could do. The other thing we can do is we can build and gain sponsorship from people who are making the decisions on getting to the next level. What are their business problems? It comes back to this. There's a theme here. It comes back to the same thing. It does come back to basic self-interest of those economic buyers. Yeah. What's on their agenda most of all that's painful and hurting their business that you can have a big impact with. So this was the deliberate focus rather than more and more and more and more competence. This was actually more and more influence and more visibility. Over a period of 6 to 9 months, built effective relationships and got sponsorship from 3 people. Yeah. This was critical though. What then happened was they kept on getting really good assignments. Okay, we'd like you to go and solve this. Will you take this job on? And they come back to me and I'd say, don't take the job. And because the title is the same. There's no increase in salary. There's no increase. You do not go to the next level. You do not get the additional resources, etc., etc. Say no. This happened 3 or 4 times. Okay. I think by the end, he genuinely was like, didn't like me. Okay. I was really frustrated by me. I said, trust me, we need to hold our nerve. Even at one point, I was like, do you know who we're saying no to? I'm like, I'm very aware of who we're saying no to. Eventually, that person got the message. The message was, I'm not solving all of this. I don't mind doing some side of desk things and whatever it may be, etc. But I'm not doing all of that. Anyway, 9 months later, they got promoted. They were already very good, but the level of competency had not gone up exponentially. Okay, what had gone up was the advocacy in the room when they were not in the room. So my question to the audience is, who are your sponsors? And just a little bit on sponsorship here. Sponsorship isn't a nice relationship. People are not doing this because they're nice. Okay. I remember the very first time I got sponsorship. I didn't even know I was being sponsored. Okay. But I was actually sat down and the person said to me, do come to me if you get any issues or challenges in these particular areas, because you might well face some resistance over here. You need to keep me informed. Okay. I've got other businesses to manage now. I'm going to assume everything's fine but I don't want any surprises. I don't want people giving me surprises. Okay. It's mutual self-interest. You are helping the sponsors solve their business problems. They are helping you solve your business problems and your career problems. This is not a nice, cozy relationship. It's mutual, human self-interest that is driving it. The great thing when you're solving somebody else's self-interest is they're vested. And if you're vested as well, we know what gets great things done is when we have 1 or 2 people or more vested in a purpose to move in the same direction. That's effectively the basis of teamwork. So this is uncomfortable for many people. It was certainly uncomfortable for me when I first heard about it, but this is how decisions get made. And it does blow the piece for me is you cannot sit there, even in a very, very sales-led organizations with lead tables, etc. Those decisions are not going to be merit-based only. And it's always a good one when somebody gets promoted and just about to join an organization, ask them, what was the criteria? Why did you promote that person? What have they got to promote? It tells you a lot again about what people do rather than what they say they're going to do.
Wow, I think we've ended there on some uncomfortable truths there for a lot of people, and certainly for me, understanding that business, once you've reached I guess a base level of competency, the relationships that you have and the meritocracy becomes almost inverted in terms of the trust that you bring to the situation and the ability to work hard and do what you say you're going to do and network and look to solve problems is almost more important than the list of qualifications or even the places that you've worked in terms of what matters. So I'm going to do something that Adrian is a past master at now, and that is try to summarize this fantastic conversation for you, and caveat that by saying this will be my summary. But my biggest takeaways today, Adrian, before I hand it back to you, is be super curious. Start with that point, being super curious about who you are, about the businesses that you want to work with, where you want to get to in your career, the pain points that you can solve. But also in doing that, be connected. And I think that networking, being visible, finding the platforms that you can do, and that can be conferences, it can be writing articles. LinkedIn's a great one as well, obviously. But it's also self-awareness. And I loved your commuting anecdote, because actually you're right. And so many of us, whether it's a commute or a regular business trip, have literally thousands of hours across a year that we could actually be taking in small chunks and saying, all right, hour and a half now, what have I done this week or this past month? It's progressed things. Where do I want to get to next? What can I tweak? And I think actually that's a very powerful tool that if you're looking for takeaways to go with. But then to your point of the career cycles, and I liked the way that you ran, to use a pun with my heptathlete analogy, but I think actually breaking down the skill sets that you might want to achieve, build upon, to get you to not just your next, but your next. And I think actually that forward-looking piece, that your next job is perhaps a stepping stone, or you're intentionally saying, this is a year, this is what I want to get out of it, and this is where I want to get to. And I think the other key things were not mistaking performance for visibility. I think that's a huge thing, and what you were just talking about there from a sponsorship point of view was huge. And as you said, these aren't people that necessarily that you are going to sit on a bar stool with. Some of them might be, but these are people that actually know who you are, know what your worth is, and that might be abstract people that sit on the board of your company, or it might be your direct line manager or various other people in between. But those people advocating for you whilst you're not in the room is hugely important. And I imagine almost as important as the connections and the networking that you do out with your business. But I think the thing that I want to end on is your concept of 4 wins, because I think that's really crucial to the whole conversation, because you've got to know your value. You've got to, as you were saying, get rewarded appropriately, and that comes from negotiating and all the rest of it. But if you've found, I think it was 4 wins to the business, the industry, to an executive, to your line manager, to the team, and you're solving problems for them, and they win first and then yourself, then you're always going to win, because they're already winning and they can't win without you. And I think that mindset, and I like it from a life perspective as much as I do a business one, because to your point, decisions are rarely made on just merit anymore. It is about a social interaction. And, it's perhaps a cliche, but in payments, we talk about people buying from people.
Yes.
And we are people in this context, and we are selling ourselves to that point, and who we are and what we add to a given business. So I think that's been hugely useful to me. I hope it is to others. But Adrian, have I missed anything? Is there anything else you would like to add?
No, that's a fantastic summary, and thank you very much. And I think it's just to make 2 points, if I may, is the piece about curiosity is everybody who's appeared on this show the one common trait every single guest to such a privilege to have so many phenomenal people on the show is their common trait is they're extraordinarily curious.
Yes.
And I think it's almost a prerequisite to come into this industry. But if I could just leave with one final piece, which is the good news here, was anybody could be overwhelmed with some of the things we've talked about here. All these things are learnable.
Yes.
Every single one of them. Just like any cognitively complex task in life is learnable. It's learnable with deliberate practice, access to the right awareness and the right environment, whether that's advisory, coaching, or whether it's different other people there. But it's also about exposure. Knowing this is possible is the first start of those. So if there's one message that, I'm a very optimistic and very hopeful individual, is wherever you are right here, right now, and you want to make a shift, breaking this down, getting the right advice, getting the right level of self-reflection, getting your own notebook and pencil out, okay, all of this is learnable. And I wish everybody well, because I believe everybody should have a career they enjoy, that gives them a chance to express their very best skills, and they should be appropriately rewarded for the value they add, and preferably do it with a smile on their face.
Absolutely. I 100% agree and echo those things. And I guess my hope today is that we have helped some people make some better decisions in the future. But I guess to leave it to this point, Adrian is available on LinkedIn. He has the ability to make an appointment if anybody would want to explore some of these things further. I can wholeheartedly advocate for Adrian. He's a wonderful person to speak to about these complex and sometimes difficult themes. And myself, if anyone has been interested in talking more about narrative or communications or the fintech industry at large, or rugby in mind, which is often where Adrian and our conversations lead to, I'd be more than happy to reach out and speak. But for now, this has been the Career Decision Room, and keep asking better questions.
Thank you very much indeed. Good luck, everybody.